Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Trending in Hollywood right here on the Hollywood Critics Association Network. I, of course, am Scott Menzel, and I am always joined by the man, the myth, the white man in charge,
The
Demetri
middle-aged man.
Panos. The middle-aged white man in charge right here, Demetri Panos.
Hey, what's going on, Scott? Can you believe it's been a week? It's been too long. It's been too long since we last talked.
You know what? If we didn't talk every single day, I would actually kind of believe that. But
It was a joke. It was a
so, for
joke.
those who don't know, me and Demetri have known each other for many years now, and
35, 40.
we talk on the regular. And basically, when you watch this show, this is just basically an extension of one of our phone calls that we have daily. So kudos to you and everyone to enjoy that. So hopefully you'll like that.
It's all the research, the hard work and research that gets put into this show. It takes a week. So it all culminates into like an hour. You know how hard that is? You do.
They do. They definitely do. So you're going to notice that this episode's a little bit different from the previous ones that we've done, where we've kind of talked about a bunch of news stories throughout the week. This was actually a very light news week. I mean, you can mention the fact that, Venom 2 was delayed a couple weeks or a couple months. So that is, I mean, we all hope that Venom 2 is better than Venom 1, but only time will tell. But we don't really need to talk about that. It's old news at this point, and people aren't really talking about it all that much. But we did want to talk about two stories real quick before we touch base on the big topic, which, of course, is something that's been trending in Hollywood for probably at least 6 months, but probably realistically about 4 freaking years. And that, of course, is Zack Snyder's Justice League, which we'll have a full review for. And then an in-depth spoiler conversation about everything that led up to the release on HBO Max. So, Demetri, I'm going to pass this over to you. We're gonna start it off with our old friends with the red card. And they're talking about coming back from the dead. What do you think about this?
No one was more surprised that, like, had I woken up with my cheek stapled to a carpet, I wouldn't have been more surprised to see this news come out. It's kind of crazy to me, and I'm curious to know what will happen on, March 22nd, I believe. And this story comes out of Variety. Now, as a person who worked for MoviePass and actually believed that at the time their heart was in the right place until a certain particular someone took over, whose name rhymes with witch. I don't know. It was like once that happened, MoviePass did everything in its power to get put out of business, basically. And their biggest no-no was they went to war with the exhibitors. Now, I do think that, look, if MoviePass wants to talk to me and hire me, I believe that things could get set straight. Yes, Cinemark, AMC, Cinema World has, I believe, or Regal has a subscription format. But I believe that a lot of indie theaters and other theaters who can't afford the infrastructure to come up with the technology to do a subscription, I think MoviePass can work. They have to do a major mea culpa in order for this to happen. And they have to be ready to spend a ton of money to do it. They have to go on a mea culpa tour. Basically, no, I'm serious. Like, they have to go out there and say to the exhibitor, we're sorry. What happened with that other regime, albeit it's not us, we're going to apologize to you. What they did to you, the exhibitor, was wrong. MoviePass was never intended to go to war with you. We were meant to help your customers. And I think that they could do it in such an affordable way for a lot of theaters that they could gain popularity. It's just crazy. It's going to be very interesting to see how this happens. At first, I thought it was an April Fool's joke, but we were well beyond. We're not near April Fool's yet. So I don't know. It's just going to be. I guess it'll be fun to find out.
Real quick take on this. MoviePass, when they first came out, they were like the only game in town, right? It was kind of like when Netflix first came out and they did the DVDs through the mail. Everyone kind of said, oh, I don't have to go to a store anymore. I can just log onto a website and get, discs in the mail.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had a whole bunch of like copycat companies like Redbox, where like they put them outside of grocery stores, and they're like, you know what? You don't have to pay $15 a month. You can pay $1, and you can go and rent this movie for a day. And then next time you come back to the grocery store, or tomorrow when you come back to the grocery store, just drop it off. Yada yada yada. I think it's more than exhibitors this time around, because I think you have all the individual theaters having their own platforms now. With Studio Movie Grill, you have Alamo, you have Regal, you have AMC. Everyone has their own standalone.
Right.
The only ones that don't are like the more regional chains that are only in like certain locations, like ArcLights, where there's not that many of them.
Right.
And they're also a premium service, theater chain.
But I want to interrupt you because you mentioned two theater chains there. You mentioned AMC Theaters and Studio Movie Grill. Okay, so it should be known AMC Theaters was the pilot exhibitor for MoviePass. Okay.
Oh, okay.
They were the pilot. They were the theater chain in which MoviePass first approached in order to do their testing to show to AMC Theaters the information that could be garnered by use of MoviePass. So things turned rather somewhat quickly. Okay, second of all, you mentioned Studio Movie Grill. I have to, I'm going to pat myself on the back on that. They were a MoviePass. They were queued up to get into the MoviePass system. So we had about 6 exhibitors in line to get queued in so that we could get into their ticketing, their point of sales, so to speak. Studio Movie Grill being one of them. They really liked the idea. They were great and easy people to work with. And, they were fantastic. Like, they understood it. So it was really interesting that a lot of these companies now do their own, but it's a lot of expenditure to do,
Yeah.
It's not an easy technology.
No, I'm sure it's not. And I mean, also, the more demand you have for it, the more your app is likely to crash, and the more issues you have. And then each chain operates differently. I remember, you used to you had to be within a certain feet of the theater, and sometimes it wouldn't pick up, and then you have to email customer service. It was a very frustrating experience.
It could
which
be.
is why I think the individual ones, where they're kind of tied specifically to the brand, were so much easier to use. Like when I had the Regal app, I was just like, okay, I want to go see Justice League. I can click on Justice League, and then they would show me the show times, and I can check the theaters around me. And it wasn't even where I had to be in front of the theater. So I think there's been a lot of evolution in that. I think they're going to have to either, if they're going to come back, and I don't know how much clout we should really give them at this point. I think they're either going to have to be either a discounted type version or a premium version. And they're going to have big shoes to fill considering what's already out there right now.
Yeah. Again, MoviePass, I have a ton of ideas. You can survive in the marketplace because of the technology that you had. But we could talk a hell of a lot longer about MoviePass. In fact, we should probably wait until after that March 22nd date. We should move on because a lot of people are clamoring Justice League.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, real quick, we'll just go over this real quick. Golden Globes break silence. I'm just going to touch upon this real quick, and then Demetri, go ahead and throw it. If you've watched this show in the weeks past, and if you follow me on social media, or if you know me in general, one of my biggest issues within this industry is the fact that a lot of the decisions that are made ultimately are just for bottom line, and I'm talking about moolah. And if you read that article, out of everything that's the most glaring is the fact that they paid $60 million to air that show, which is like insanity to me, because it's basically a show that's made for industry people and the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. Like, I mean, the average person gives no shits about Golden Globes. They just don't. I mean, yes, they like the movie stars and the fashion and whatnot, but like the actual award ceremony itself, nobody cares about, because most people don't watch those movies. And I'm not trying to be a discredit to any of the movies, the filmmakers or whatever, but it's just not there. So when I read that, and then I hear like, oh, this comes after the article that we talked about last week, which was the studios kind of getting the PR teams together and telling talent, like, maybe we shouldn't support them. This is all just a money grab, right? Because, like, the Golden Globes are going to do whatever they need to do to not lose money. And it's not natural. It's not organic. It's not from the heart. It's not like, oh, we really want to do this. Because the damage is already done. You went 20 years without a black person in your organization. It's not like we're in the 50s, okay? We're in like, you're like the 90s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s.
And Pia Zadora.
It's been there. I mean, Jesus. So anyway, I mean, I don't know why Hollywood just can't say, you know what, there's so many other groups out there where they can elevate them and kind of say like, all right, we're not going to support you. We'll support LA. We'll support New York. We'll support whoever. There's so many other opportunities out there. Give it to someone else. That's all I have to say.
That's pretty much enough. I mean, this year is very different, but $60 million, where do you, that's the budget of at least 5 independent movies.
At least,
right there.
I mean, and you're talking about ones with a decent
$10 million. Yeah. I mean, $60 million for that show, especially this year. And we saw the ratings, and it's just going to be interesting to see what happens with the HFPA. It's going to be interesting to see if they've been taken down a notch, and maybe, but look, they've always gone in with bluster and ego and expectation. It's like, how are you going to treat us? How do you treat the HFPA? We demand that we have a screening of your movie, and we want it at this screening house. And it's going to be interesting to see how all this shakes out. I'm over the HFPA and their Golden Globes. So, there was an interesting article by Brian Stelter from CNN who talked about how the consumption of pop culture has changed so drastically. Do these shows even matter anymore? And you and I talked about this because the Grammys also took a hit in their ratings big time, right? And you talk about stars that show up at the HFPA. There was a time when people tuned in for that specifically. There was a time where people tuned into the Grammys so that they could see their famous or favorite performers do their thing live, right? And this year, the Grammys had an amazing, stellar lineup of people that I believed were popular with the kiddies, and still nobody tuned in. So, anyways, whatever. I say we get into. Go ahead.
Yeah. Real quick, just before we move that off, that I do want to just say one last point. I think what people are not talking about with award ceremonies is that you get all the highlight reels pretty much immediately afterwards.
Yeah.
So why do you have to watch a 3-hour plus show when if you want to see Taylor Swift will have that video posted for you within 5 minutes after she's done performing.
Right. Well,
So
I
I
think
think that's what the problem is.
I think in part they used to be entertaining.
Well, that too. That's
So there. Yeah.
All righty. So here we go. Everyone who's in the chat, thank you for watching, and we know why you tuned in. And of course, Zack Snyder's Justice League. So how this is going to go, I'm going to let Demetri go first. We're just going to do a basic review, kind of like our feelings, thoughts, whatever, on this 4-hour epic journey. And Demetri, take it away.
Okay, so first off, I do have to do my own mea culpa, okay? Because this is, 4 years in the making, right? Since 2017. There's been so much talk about this Justice League Snyder Cut, and I truly, honestly believed it was a myth. A myth. It didn't exist. So what are you clamoring for? This doesn't exist. Well, I was proven wrong, especially this past weekend when DC had their fandom event. And you know what? I will bear that. That's fine, because ultimately, after watching this Snyder Cut, look, I prefer this version. Not unlike how I prefer James Cameron's director's cuts over the regular theatrical cut. I would love to do at some point a side-by-side, like to the Snyder Cut to James Cameron's, say, Aliens. Adding the Snyder Cut in its 4 hours, I believed it smoothed out the flaws of the theatrical of that 2017 release. It still has some flaws of its own, but it flushed out narratives and plot points, excising certain elements from that theatrical release. And I ultimately did enjoy watching this epic unfold. Now, I watched it at home. And Scott, we could talk about watching something at home as opposed to watching it, say, in a theater, in IMAX. Which, from what I understand, if you do see it in IMAX, it comes with an intermission at about 2 hours, 20 minutes into the movie. This is the way that I saw Hateful Eight. I went to the roadshow version of that movie, which was over 3.5 hours long. Watching a movie with an intermission, it's foreign to us today. But I think that watching a movie in a theater, you don't get as distracted. AKA, I'm going to get up and have lunch now. I'm going to go make some popcorn. When you're in a theater, you really do get into that movie, and I would suggest you try to watch it that way if you're able. The movie looks and sounds really great. I enjoyed. Look, a lot of people are talking about Cyborg. I don't think enough people are talking about the additional Ezra Miller as the Flash sequences. His introduction to Justice League, to Zack Snyder's Justice League, is amazing. Okay, I think the end plays out way better. It's far more emotional. You get more into it. The final battle is better played out. And there are a lot of choices. There are a lot of things in this movie that I think really worked. So if I had a preferred version, not unlike, do I like the theatrical version of, say, The Abyss or James Cameron's director's cut? I would tell you, go with the director's cut. I would also recommend do the Zack Snyder cut. Carve out some time. Carve out some time to see the movie. Zack Snyder had a great quote that I read yesterday. If you can binge 4 hours or 4 episodes of an hour-long television show on streaming, you could sit your ass down for a 4-hour movie because it's just the same thing. So watch it. I think for me, it's the preferred version. Still has some flaws, which we could talk about in a little bit, but I ultimately enjoyed Zack Snyder's The Justice League.
All right, cool. All right, so My full review is up on WeLiveEntertainment.com. If you want to read, I go into detail. To echo Demetri, I'll never forget when the first Justice League came out, and I remember the fan outcry, and I immediately after seeing the movie, which I admittedly did not hate, and I continue to say that because I saw the potential in the 2017 version. I think there was a lot there that just wasn't fleshed out enough, and now seeing this 4-hour version, I kind of shake my head. I wonder why. It makes no sense. And I'm not saying I agree with Demetri. I think when you look at a superhero movie, and I said this in my review, I think it's the using of the word of masterpiece when you use them for different types of movies, it has a different meaning. And I'm someone who fully believes that there is no masterpiece or perfection of a single movie. I think every movie, even like a movie like The Godfather, has flaws to it. So when I use the word masterpiece, I apply that towards the particular type of film and what it goes up against. So in my definition, this version of Justice League is as close to a masterpiece as a superhero type movie. I think it's better than Endgame. I think it's better than Infinity War. And the reason why is because those movies had 20 movies to build up to. This movie had four movies. It had Man of Steel, it had Batman v Superman, it had Wonder Woman, and then it had this proper version of Justice League. And there is so much depth in this movie and character backstory to what Demetri said about the Flash, to what people have been saying about Cyborg. We knew nothing about these characters prior to this movie. And in the Joss Whedon version, or whatever, the theatrical 2017 version, we got like little hints upon that. And they felt very mismanaged. And you didn't really feel like you knew the characters. And I think the interesting thing about this version is that you watch the Flash and you kind of have a little bit more understanding of his backstory, and you kind of say like, all right, I don't know everything about him, but I got enough there that I kind of like relate to him. I like him. I get that character. And then you're going to get a standalone movie. And the same can be said about Cyborg and his character and how his story arc works and how he becomes the heart of the film in a lot of ways, and kind of like the main plot point. I mean, Cyborg is the main plot point of this movie in a lot of ways because he controls the power, which I guess we can talk about because the movie's out now. He is one of the people who controls one of the mother boxes. So while I look at these movies and I kind of acknowledge the fact that the 2017 version is like kind of like in the back window at this point, and I probably will never be able to watch that movie again in the same light as I did originally. This movie just is epic, and it feels fleshed out. And my friend Wilson Morales, and I said this on Monday's show on Pop Council, he said this movie is very poetic. It's like poetry, and I would agree with that. It takes its time, it builds, and you get this payoff, and it's really a movie that's made for fans. And I think that's what's the most important takeaway from it.
I agree. And as far as poetic goes, I say it's more like a Greek, like the Odyssey.
Yeah.
Because it has this Greek mythos to it from beginning to end. It is done in chapters as well. And you bring up, I think, a really good point, Scott, because the origins of this movie, the origins of why this happened and everything are completely fascinating to me as someone who loves behind the scenes. And I really think that there should be a documentary on how this came to be, why this came to be. There's got to be a book coming out for behind the scenes. There were many factors that happened. One of the things for me about this movie that I had not realized until just recently is that all of the scenes were pretty much all of the scenes were pretty much shot. They had this movie that just needed to be put together and finished, special effects and everything, which is shocking to me because it further goes to, a lot of people are like bag on Joss Whedon. Now look, I want to be extraordinarily clear here. I'm putting the Joss Whedon personal controversies aside for a moment, okay? I want to just talk as a filmmaker who was hired to do a job, and that job was to punch up the script. When you look at the 2017 version, Joss Whedon's name is only appears in the credits in the writing and in second unit work. He's not co-credited with directing or anything like that. We all know that he came in. We all know that Zack Snyder and his wife Deborah suffered a great tragedy, and he had to leave the project. What I believe, though, is not a lot of people are focusing on, they're putting the blame on Joss Whedon, who was more or less at that time just a mercenary in a sense. They hired Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers, it's very important. Warner Brothers. I think it bears on their shoulders the fault of Justice League. I think the whole DC universe and this debacle falls on Warner Brothers. They came very, very, very late to the party. I talked about this at length on Anatomy of a Movie, a little show that I used to do on the Popcorn Talk Network with Phil Zvitek and Marissa. Basically, they reversed engineered everything. And I could just see the meeting right now going, I could see the meeting where somebody says, hey, we own DC, right? And somebody going, DC, like the electric outlet? No, like DC Comics. We own DC Comics. We do. Yes, we do. Oh, well, look what Marvel's doing. Oh yeah, Marvel's, oh my God, they're making money hand over fist. We need to do the same thing. Okay, let's do this. So it was an afterthought, and then they rushed everything. We get to Justice League almost as a reverse engineering. Their thought process was, let's make this movie. We're going to make Man of Steel, Superman versus Batman. And then we're going to do like Justice League. I forget, did Wonder Woman come out?
Wonder Woman came out before
Justice League, right? Yeah. So we have the three main characters without any explanation of the Flash and Cyborg. And to be honest, look, Cyborg is a character. He's a tertiary character. I kind of liken him to, imagine watching the Avengers and this Nordic god comes out of nowhere, like without the Thor movies.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't know who that character was, right? And many people, you got to take it above and beyond comic book people. If nobody knows who Cyborg is, and let's get, I think Flash from a Q point standing, people more.
Well, yeah, he had a CW show and stuff like that. So that people knew who
I think people know this Flash is, but they don't know who Cyborg is. So then you get this Justice League movie. So then you get, everything happens with Snyder. Joss Whedon comes in. He's put in an unenviable position. And, and Warner Brothers now is telling him, I think Warner Brothers saw what Snyder was doing, and I think they started getting scared. It's like he wants to release a 4-hour movie, which is crazy to me because this is the company that took one book, The Hobbit, and made it into 3 movies. So nobody make this into 3 2-hour movies. And I think they got a little scared. Snyder has to understandably leave. And then they say, Whedon, you got to make this 2 hours and make it work. I think he did what he could. And People weren't happy about it. They walked out from what we read. But again, instead of blaming Whedon, and you can't blame Zack Snyder at all, you got to go as to how it all came together. And Warner Brothers really needs to take they need to this needs to fall on their shoulders. This was their fault.
Oh, I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
Don't you agree?
I think, okay, so there's a lot to unfold what you just said. All right. Number one, I strongly believe in this. And that is, if you're going to hire a filmmaker, you have to trust in your filmmaker. And you have to fully realize at the time that not everyone is going to love the end result. That is why very few movies, to kind of go back to my masterpiece conversation or my perfect conversation, there are very few movies that I ever hand out a 10 out of 10 to, or have 100% Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, like, realistically, what does that even mean? Because a Rotten Tomatoes 100% means that a bunch of people could have gave that movie a 7 or a 6.5 or 7.5. So you got to take everything with a grain of salt. But the most important thing is you have to, as a company, you have to believe in your filmmakers. So if Zack Snyder has a vision, and it's a very dark vision, then you sort of have to go into that and say, okay, what's your outline? What do you want to do? And you can't get cold feet like halfway through it, which is what they did with Batman versus Superman too. Because I don't know, Demetri, if you watched it, but if you watch the unrated version or the extended version of Batman versus Superman,
right,
like this movie, so much better. So much better because it's fleshed out. Like, you kind of like, oh, that was the full vision. That was the full vision there. And again, not for everyone. Not everyone's going to like it. But you have to allow the filmmaker the opportunity to make the movie that they want. And I wouldn't be as upset about this, and I'm sure this is what the fans are upset about, if it wasn't shown that this has happened with Patty Jenkins, Kathy Yan, David Ayer. The reason why the guy who did Dope, who was going to do the Flash movie, originally left because they were going to interfere. This is a bigger problem that they have. So, like, Marvel has, like, Kevin Feige, and Kevin Feige is 100% the boss, and he says, you follow my formula, you can have your vision, you can do X, Y, and Z, but you have to follow this formula that I have laid out. And it's seen in every one of the movies. They follow a very specific formula. Now, personally, from a creative standpoint, the reason why I cling to DC films more than Marvel films is the fact that I like to see the director's visions in all of the movies. Like, I like that Wonder Woman has a totally different tone than, say, Zack Snyder's movies in this universe.
Sure.
I like Shazam because it has a totally different tone than Birds of Prey. Birds of Prey has a much different tone than Justice League. I like seeing filmmakers do what they do best and make a movie their own. When I watch a Marvel movie, I feel like it's literally all of the same, except for when the movies are really bad, like a Thor movie or an Iron Man 2, and I'm like, kind of like, whoa, what happened here? But all the rest of them, I feel like the formula is all there. There's some trademarks from directors or filmmakers with style, but like the storylines and, they're very formulaic. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. My only thing is that with DC coming late into the game, they were kind of playing catch up.
Yeah.
And I don't mind that there is a tone put forth, but there's nobody guiding. There's no pilot. There's nobody steering the ship in the right way, and that's why DC or Warner Brothers was kind of like, oh, we've got DC. Oh, we could be making comic book movies. Oh, we need to make a Justice League movie without really much thought as to how we're going to get there. So it's kind of crazy to me how that happened. Can you hear anything in the background from my end?
It's not a big deal, though. It's okay. Don't worry about it.
Okay. It's just surprising to me as to how their comic book franchise was botched. It really is. And when you talk about Zack Snyder, you talk about a director and giving him leeway. I think at the beginning, that's what Warner Brothers was doing with Zack Snyder. But I also tend to think that Warner Brothers felt that they were like Kevin Feige. That,
yeah.
Well, they were like, we can work with Zack Snyder because A, he wants to work. B, he has a bit of a fandom behind him. C, he loves this stuff, and he does. Oh my God, if anything from this Justice League you understand is he loves this mythology of the superhero. Loves it, right? But more importantly, he, at the end of the day, when we tell him to jump, he is going to say, how high? He's going to do what we say. Hence, they gave him the control, like Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, and then ultimately Justice League. I think he had a hand in Wonder Woman. I think his name's on the credits.
He's a producer on it.
Right, so he was the Kevin Feige without the power.
Yeah.
He's molding this going in. And I feel that by the time Justice League came around, they wanted to like not listen to their own instincts. And plus, go ahead, please.
No, but that's exactly what it is. I mean, it's the studio interference of like them getting cold feet very early on. I mean, if you read a lot of the research behind this, it's like the reason why, Batman versus Superman didn't do well because they cut it. They made him cut it down. Obviously, there's certain scenes in that movie where, like, when you watch it in the theatrical version versus watching it on the uncut version, again, scenes don't make sense. Seem out of place, and you kind of like you get cold feet, and it's like you kind of, if you're committed to something, you have to kind of like let it go. Like you kind of have to. And what they did was they started meddling like right away. So it's like you're 2 movies in with this guy. You're already telling him what should and shouldn't be in the movie, and then to kind of come in here. I mean, that's what the thing that I think all the fans are upset about is that to come in with Justice League to reshoot the opening. I mean, literally. I mean, you watch this movie within 20 minutes. You look at the freaking opening to Justice League 2017, and you see the movie open with a freaking iPhone of Superman talking in there like he's selfie talking to someone like. Who made this call? Like, what a terrible decision. Right. And then you're watching this, and it picks up exactly where Batman versus Superman leaves off. And you're kind of like, okay, like, this is a continuation. I get where this is going.
I love that you break this up because I wrote this down in my notes while I was watching Justice League, and I wrote right here, much stronger opening. The death of Superman and his final breath / scream, which awakens the mother boxes.
Yeah.
That to me, that's the opening. What do you mean you're opening up with Batman with the parademons and they smell fear? And I was like, what go? No, the Superman dying, because it's such an integral plot point throughout the remainder. That's the only reason why Steppenwolf and Darkseid are able to come to Earth, because Superman is dead.
Yes.
And it was such a stronger opening. And it boggles the mind that they didn't even go with that. But it even boggles the mind even more is knowing that a lot of this footage was already shot. Scott, you can correct me because you actually talked to Zack Snyder about this, right?
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong. He only shot one scene.
Correct.
Right?
So
be put into this 4-hour version.
The fascinating thing about this is, and I don't have this portion of the interview loaded on here, but it'll go up on We Live Entertainment later today. I asked him, first question out of the gate was like, talk to me about the editing process of this. And he said, we did some voice recording. For the gentleman, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name, but the gentleman who did the voice of Steppenwolf, They did some.
Ciaran Hinds.
Yes,
I
so they
believe
did
it
some
was, yeah.
re-recording of lines for him. But most of that budget went into shooting one scene, but let's just say like 90% of it went into special effects to improve upon the special effects that were really, really freaking botched. I mean, you watched again 2017 versus this, but the movie was done. Literally, you have the only thing that was really added in was like a freaking cliffhanger scene at the end of this movie. That everything else was there. So like you had a full movie that just needed to be put together, sitting on a shelf for 4 freaking years. And everyone was like, this doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. It's like he's come out and said it. It was there. It's there. It was there. Nobody ever wanted to touch it, which is like insane. And just to see the reaction, I mean, we'll talk about this real quick too. The critical reaction. Again, like I said, not everyone loves it. We knew that. I mean, you already had a couple people who were going to be built-in haters. We knew this. Like, there were people who were determined to hate this movie no matter what. We know that. That's just the way it is. How dare you give in to the fans? Screw this movie. I don't want no part of it. I'm already to shit this movie. We know that happens. And if anyone wants to try to argue and lie that it doesn't happen in this industry, you're full of freaking crap. But at the end of the day, the ratings speak for themselves. It has, I think, a 97 audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. It's sitting at around a 75, 76 from a critical score. And you know what? That's very fair considering this film and the type of movie that it is. And I think for superhero movies in general, I think a superhero movie that's over 80% really comes with a lot of bias. Because I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if there's anyone where I would put up like an 100%. I don't think we've gotten there with superhero movies. Real quick, and I'm sorry, I want to backpedal a little bit, backtrack. I think now reading about all the Nolan stuff, I think that's some of the fascinating stuff that kind of come out of this, right? Like, it's like Deborah and Christopher Nolan sat down and they watched Justice League together, and they were like, Zach can never see this movie, right?
Right.
Which is like, why didn't Warner Brothers... Since they Nolan has a dark vision, right? He kind of works very, obviously not as stylish in terms of stuff as Snyder is with the slow-mo and all that stuff. But his vision versus Joss Whedon seems like more along the same lines. So I'm wondering, since Warner Brothers has such a long-standing relationship with Nolan and he's a producer on the damn film, why didn't they just bring him in to finish it?
Too much money. I don't know. I don't know. I just think that in this case, Whedon was kind of like a victim of circumstance. He's brought in to punch up a script, and then he's like, oh my God, this is the guy that did Avengers. Oh, let's have him do for this movie what he did with Avengers. Hey, Joss, you want to direct? And he's like, yeah, he probably needed the paycheck at the time. So why not? And Warner Brothers probably felt they had a coup going. It's like, oh, we stole from Warner Brothers, or I'm not Warner Brothers. We stole from Disney or Marvel, and we got the Marvel Wonderkind, and we're bringing them over to our side. And he just did a job, and it's very unfair. I think I want to take the unfairness to another point. This sadly could be a standalone movie now.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a standalone movie. It's still with its flaws. I do think that this Zack Snyder's cut, Justice League, I think it is too long in a sense. I think that there are there's the Martha Kent visiting Lois Lane and when Manhunter had me scratching my head. And I know that Martian Manhunter shows up at the end of the movie, but again, he's another character where if you're not familiar with that world, you're like, who the hell is this guy? And you mentioned that it ends on a cliffhanger. Look, I think that the Zack Snyder cut is everything that Zack Snyder filmed. I would be extraordinarily surprised to learn that there are deleted scenes.
Yeah.
Because I think he just threw everything in there because it was cathartic for him and his wife. They dedicated the movie to their daughter,
Yeah.
Autumn, which is very touching and sweet. But I think we've seen everything of Justice League, and a lot has happened in these 4 years as well. Ben Affleck, Henry Cavill, no longer Superman, Batman, which is sad to me because I thought the both of them were very good. I thought they were really good as those characters. Particularly, it was great to see Ben Affleck. I thought he played a great Batman. They've already, Matt Reeves, they just wrapped, I think, this past week with another incarnation of Batman with Robert Pattinson in that role. They just announced that they're making another Superman movie. I forget who the writer
Superman
is.
Movie, yeah.
Yeah. So it looks like Warner Brothers again is changing paths. They're changing course. Where Zack Snyder had a trilogy, this Dark Side saga, all laid out. And God, after watching this 4-hour movie, I want to see how his saga plays out. But I don't know. I'm afraid that we're not going to. But you had an interesting perspective on this earlier today.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the big thing is you have to understand that the luxury that comic book movies have is that they have this, and both Marvel and DC have this, and we're seeing this in all the news about the Spider-Man movie, where there's going to be different versions of Spider-Man and yada yada yada, and we're talking about that with the Flash movie, where we're going to have Michael Keaton come back as Batman. So with DC and Marvel, you have this great advantage to do a multiverse, and since streaming has become such a huge draw over the last couple of years, this could be something that Warner Brothers, kind of bids farewell to. But HBO Max says, oh my God, we have never seen so much press towards our service and our subscription numbers. I mean, I cannot wait to see what those subscription numbers are going to look like at the end of this weekend. I mean, and the amount of people who are probably pirating this freaking thing, I mean, because it's not out in different countries. I mean, it's insane. But anyway, this movie literally is the movie that kind of broke the internet for the last couple of months. And to see the numbers and everything flash out, I'm going to go out there on a limb and say this. I see that this continuation happening on HBO Max because the buzz, both critical and audience and fans, is terrific. And I think everyone, even if you don't love this movie, people are curious to see where it was going to go. And now that we have these multi-universes set up and we're talking about that, why not have this? And this could be something that maybe it's not a movie. Maybe it's not a movie. Maybe it becomes a mini-series. Maybe it becomes its own series. And I would play that.
I would want Zack Snyder to be involved. Like 100%.
He needs to be involved. I mean, I want to see this, whether it's one mini-series, kind of like the Watchmen show on HBO. If it's a 7-8 episode thing, I want him to be able to complete this. I want to see where this is going. I mean, that nightmare scene at the end of this movie, with the way that he set up Cyborg and the Flash, spoiler alert, we're already talked about spoilers, but like the death of Lois Lane gets mentioned in that scene, and I mean, like, that is going to be some epic unfolding that I cannot wait to see, like a real Batman versus Superman face-off where, like, he's, I mean, freaking pissed. But yeah, I know people have, I always try to stay out of this. I know people have issues with Jared Leto and whatever stuff happened with him. I try to stay out of it. I watch movies because I watch movies. I don't care about movie stars' lives. I think this versus like that crappy version in Suicide Squad.
Uh-huh.
I love this this looks like it's very promising. It looks dark and deep, and I mean the nice R rating of it, like how like freaking graphic it was. Like I'm kind of like, yeah, I like this very much. Like I love the Joaquin Phoenix version of this.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just want to see where it goes. I really want.
Yeah, I'm with you. While we're talking about this, I want to talk about let's if it's okay with you, I want to talk about favorite scenes.
Oh yes,
because I had a couple. One of them was the opening. The opening to me was amazing because it was perfect setup, and then I got a better understanding where these about the mother boxes, and then the movie really does flesh out like why they're in tune and why they're screaming out, now's the time to invade. But I love the opening scene, and I already talked about, I loved the scene, our introduction to Flash. And Ezra Miller, more Ezra Miller for me is great. I really think, in a sense, to me, he too is the heart and humor of it all, because he's like, oh my God, I get to be part of this team. I don't have that many friends. I love Ezra Miller as the Flash, and Grant Gustafson, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, on TV does a good version as well. But from a movie standpoint, I think he was great. That scene was so wonderfully choreographed. One thing about Zack Snyder, he knows how to make a scene look good, and he knows how to set up like the stakes so that they get raised higher and higher. So those are just two of my favorite scenes, along with the battle scene at the end. You know, I thought they were amazing.
Oh, the battle scene at the end is part of me. It's freaking awesome. I mean, when they're all like, it's like you see every one of them go into battle individually, and how the Flash ties that scene together. I mean, we talk about using kind of like so much going on, right? Like you got the Flash going around, spinning around and thing, and then you got like Cyborg here, Wonder Woman here, and like Batman and Aquaman. Like it feels epic. I mean, it is very reminiscent to me of that scene that everyone loves in Civil War, where the airport scene, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you have that epic moment. I mean, that was, to me, that's one of the best moments in the MCU, when you have that airport scene. And this is like one of the best moments in the DCEU. It's like you have them all kind of uniting, and it's just like, man. And I love seeing Wonder Woman. I mean, I think this is something that the Wonder Woman 1984 movie does such a great disservice on, is not letting us see Wonder Woman do Wonder Woman, be Wonder Woman. It's I love the heart that Gal brings to the character in that movie, but I want to see her kick some ass. And I mean, my God, like when she was like when she goes up against Steppenwolf in the end of this movie, it's like, fuck yeah. Sorry, I'm trying not to drop the F-bomb, but man, yeah, like it's just like, yeah.
But you're so right in what the end of this movie, that final fight scene, that they couldn't do because you contained it to 2 hours and it had to be chopped up, is you had no emotional release. Like, yeah, like so, and each character had their day, you know, in the spotlight, or their day in the sun, but each rescued somebody else. And again, to Zack Snyder's credit, and it should be known, if you don't mind me speaking for you for a second, Scott.
Sure.
We're both Zack Snyder fans.
Yes.
Like, this isn't we've hated Zack Snyder, his movies suck, and then all of a sudden, whoa, wow, he's a great director. Look what he did with. No, I've liked Zack Snyder. You know, he's taken unenviable jobs like directing Watchmen, which lose-lose situation, but I'm a real fan of that. The director's cut of Watchmen, too. Scott, is another example of, I would prefer to watch that cut than the theatrical, but I enjoy the theatrical as well. But he gets how to raise the stakes in an action sequence. Like how to have, oh my God, the Flash is almost there, and then he gets taken out. Just as things are symbiotically coming together with the mother boxes. How do we get out of this? When Superman shows up and the axe just falls on him, you just go, yeah. But everybody takes their shots at Steppenwolf, but to your Wonder Woman moment, she has the moment where I'm just ending him. And she goes with the sword and his head gets lopped off and it falls into the portal and lands at Darkseid's feet. Such a better emotional hell yeah moment than what the theatrical could have ever accomplished. I don't think he died in the end of the theatrical version.
No.
You know? So yeah.
I think about the Amazonian scene too. It's so rushed and thrown together. In the theatrical cut, where this one it plays out and you really see how menacing Steppenwolf is and how much power he has. He takes down the entire, Amazon army. The bank scene in this version.
Yes.
I mean, it was almost like they were afraid to show that there were kids involved in the theatrical version. Mm-hmm. And again, that's something if you watch Wonder Woman, she has this attachment to young kids.
Especially girls.
Idolized, right? Kids idolize Wonder Woman, and that is shown in every one of the Wonder Woman movies. And in here, she protects them. She goes up against, she puts her wrist there to block the bullet. And it's so much more effective than that, watching a bunch of fucking bankers. Again, I'm sorry. Bankers, it's kind of like there's a disconnect there. But when you see the kids are there, it gives them the scene more stake. You're like, oh my God, kids to happen.
You're right. Yeah,
I think watching and just even the scene where she takes the briefcase and she flies up there. I mean, in the 2017, so short. It's just she just throws it up there. That's it. But she flies all the way up, and then she gets blasted back down, which is completely cut from that version.
Right.
It has so much more of a significant impact because of the fact that you see how that plays out.
Yeah, and that scene has its own epilogue. Number one, my favorite part of that scene is when she runs across the hostages, blocking every bullet, and she's running across, and she even pushes a person aside. She beats the bad guy, but the epilogue to the scene is the one girl who's still a little frightened. She's like, it's going to be okay now. And the girl's like, I want to be like you. And she goes, you can be anything you want, dear. She's motherly. And these are all the great traits that the first Wonder Woman had. There was a little wink at the beginning of Wonder Woman 1984. But we really do see her compassion towards the human race.
Yes.
And another part that I really enjoyed that's different than the 2017 version is when they all came to the conclusion that the only way that they can win this battle is that, Superman, they need to bring Superman back with the mother box. In the 2017 version, there was dissension, and it was basically Wonder Woman who said, Bruce, no, that's unethical. We can't do that. They tried to set up an Avengers kind of conflict within the group. I found that it worked much better that they were all thinking that it's the Flash that says it. It's I know we're all thinking the same thing here, but I want to be the first one to say it. And it's we got to try to bring Superman back. And they're all pretty much on the same page.
Yeah.
And I think it's then that they start to form as a team. So I found that plays out much better and with much more heft to the mythology of, we got to try this because without him, we're kind of screwed. Is
Yeah.
basically it.
I think that scene is important. I also think that some of the development of Cyborg and tying it in and making an emotional connection. This is actually, again, I'll post this in a little bit. Deborah Snyder, I asked her this exact question that you asked, what her favorite scene was. And it was one that stood out to me too, because I think there's deeper meaning in that scene. Is the scene where Cyborg sees a mom struggling with her daughter.
Oh yeah.
And the ATM scene. And he does something to kind of give them a bunch of money. And I thought that was, again, some people could say, oh, that's kind of cheesy. But again, it shows that these characters are human, right? Like, that's what I love about these superheroes in this, is that they're flawed characters. They're humans underneath all the technology. They have real emotion. And they can see something and they connect it to their own lives. And they say, okay, so Cyborg is dealing with the loss of his mother, his conflict with his father, and yet he sees his mom struggling and he wants to do something nice. The kindness kind of comes out and says, I want to do something. I love that moment in the film. And I love just in general that there's an actual evolution to Bruce Wayne getting the team together. Again, and it's impossible not to compare the two movies now, because you just feel like all that's so rushed. It's just like, oh, it shows up. Yeah. Bruce Wayne shows up and everyone's just kind of on board for it.
Yeah.
And like now it's like everyone kind of has like their own individual introduction. You kind of have like, a reasoning behind why they're joining. You get a little bit of their backstory and why it means something to them. What happens to this? It's not so just cut and dry. And I like every single character benefits from this movie, including Steppenwolf and Darkseid. All of those characters everyone benefits. So
everybody.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's so hard to kind of pick a favorite moment. I mean, there's so many epic badass moments where you're just kind of like, I don't know if anything tops the Wonder Woman scene at the end, or it's a combination between that one and the Flash going around. Like those two are just like kind of like those moments where you if you were in a theater with fans, I mean, could you imagine sitting there? There's people like,
yeah, no.
I mean,
I did it on my couch.
Yeah.
So, my dog looked at me funny, but I did it on my couch. To your point, though, about Cyborg and the mom.
Yeah.
And yet he still didn't see the humanity within himself, but Wonder Woman did.
Right.
Wonder Woman did. And, she did a ton of research on him. And I found that to be, because she even says to him, the mere fact that you showed up to this meeting, that you called this meeting is, that says something about you. I also found it to be very interesting that in the Zack Snyder cut, speaking of Cyborg, his dad sacrifices himself. Mm-hmm. And in the theatrical version, the dad lives. And you can see that they're sort of patching things up. Now, I'm not against like a happy ending, but I think that the heft of Cyborg seeing his dad sacrifice and himself, because the dad dies, but he does so in a way that it gives the Justice League information.
Right.
And it also is it seems to be a Zack Snyder theme, where the father self-sacrifices for quote unquote the greater good. Now, I didn't like that in Man of Steel. That's my one major. That's the one thing that it makes no sense to me at all in Man of Steel, where we have Kevin Costner in the tornado. You remember the scene?
Yeah.
And the father's like, "Oh no, you can't do this. You're going to give up your identity." And I was like, "What the hell, mom? Like, wife is going to like know who her son is, the most powerful being on the planet, and who can do something so fast that nobody would even notice and save the father." It's like, how are those two going to like square with that and be okay? You got to let him die. That's why I always think the heart attack for Pa Kent, that's something Superman has zero control of.
Yeah.
But in this movie, he writes that wrong. And he's like, you can't save me. I'm helping you. I'm self-sacrifice. But it also gives a closure to Cyborg going, my dad does know what the greater good is all about. And yeah.
I think that's a fascinating point. I think when you watch this movie, and this is the biggest kudos points I can give to this movie, is that when you watch this movie play out the way that it does, it makes up for things that are talked about in Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, and it sort of makes it feel complete. You walk away from this movie, again, not completely flawless, and again, I don't believe any movie really is, but the movie itself just feels like you're watching a continuation of a saga unfold. And you're like, oh, that happened in that movie. I wasn't too keen on that part. But this sort of like ties that loose end together, and it makes sense why it happens. And that's why when we talked about this a few minutes ago about like seeing this unfold in the end, I kind of want that. I don't even think they need to do much more. Like, just give them like another 4-hour kind of thing on HBO Max. Let him just do whatever he wants to tie up all the loose ends, and just they can wash their hands with it. But like, let him finish out what he started, because clearly there's a little end result here that we haven't gotten yet. But
True,
I love that aspect of the movie. It's just like you watch him and like, oh, that's from Man of Steel. That kind of ties into this. That makes sense. Oh, that's from Batman vs Superman. That makes sense now. Like, I think that's what a good superhero movie or good saga movie does, right? It kind of like picks up the loose ends from the previous versions or the previous films.
Yep. And he knows, I think this too is Zack Snyder's strength. He knows about the archetypical characters, right? He even does it in Sucker Punch.
Yeah.
He knows woman empowerment, and he knows what it's like to be a woman hero. So those to me, and of course he knows about Greek mythology, 300, right?
Right.
And he incorporates all this because in a sense, these are myths. These are, Superman is in a sense a god. And he treats them as such. He treats them as iconic. Even when you watch Man of Steel, there's a great you bring up Man of Steel. There's a great scene in this version of Justice League at Ma Kent's home that foreclosed and is put on for sale, where I believe it's Clark is in the window and the camera pulls back and you see the swing.
Yeah.
That is in Man of Steel. And then if you remember, there's the little kid with his arms bent like at his waist, and he's wearing a red cape.
Yeah.
Flowing. Zack Snyder gets all that. And again, those movies, yeah, there are some flaws and such, but from a visual standpoint, he is a very creative director. I wish that Warner Brothers had said, we're gonna make 3 movies out of this. Maybe they thought that would have been too much, and maybe because of the reviews of Batman vs Superman, they didn't think that people would hang around. But you just wait and see. I agree with you. I think this is going to be one of the most viewed entities on streaming, period. People have been clamoring for it, and I think for the most part, people are going to they're going to sit through it, and I think they're going to very much enjoy it, like as you and I have, and for similar reasons. I hope this show too, maybe they'll look at those other movies to appreciate it. We're not coming from a point of DC fandom, so to speak.
Yeah.
We're coming from the point of loving movies and loving the creation. And the narrative and how they're put together. And this movie, this Zack Snyder's cut, is mythology.
Yes.
In its sense. And it has its own story, which to me is fascinating. And I hope when the Blu-ray comes out, there is a good making of this. Because could you imagine if Warner Brothers just, because they initially told Zack Snyder, oh, just release it with the black and white footage.
Yeah.
Could you imagine how awful? Not that I have anything against black and white, but you do that as a companion piece, much like Disney did with Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
Show the version that they showed to the New York critics during the New York Film Festival. Show that unfinished product, but then show his 4-hour in color. The special effects are far better, and the sound is great. One other point: the soundtrack to this movie, which is I know it's available on iTunes, dude. The soundtrack is like 4 hours. I'm not kidding. Look it up. The soundtrack is 4 hours. So it's not a bad. I have to say it's not a bad soundtrack. I'm glad that Zack got to get this out. Not just for the fans. I'm happy for him. I can't wait to see his zombie movie.
Army of the Dead. Yeah.
Yeah, and Warner Brothers, you should have. I understand why you hired the guy. You should have maybe treated him a little bit better. And but this movie is now it's in the fans' hands. And from our comments, right, that I'm seeing, a lot of people do like this movie.
Yeah.
They like that nightmare scene that you were talking about. Oh, Flash's suit was brought up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think so. And real quick, I wanted to, before I close this out, and I'm gonna run two little clips that I think are important ways to just close it out. So the show will go out on the clips from an interview that I did. But I do want to say to your one point that you made a few moments ago. You know, a lot of people don't know this again, and it kind of goes against my normal thing of like digging into people's like lives and whatnot instead of judging a movie. But Zack and Deborah Snyder are great people. Not only are they great people in terms of being lovers of cinema and supporters of cinema, but they want to do good for the world. I think their American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, I think their support for this over the last couple of years has been amazing. But also the fact that they're open their house and their home to foster care and taking care of kids. And so when you were mentioning the fact of having like a father sacrifice in these movies, I sort of understand that. And now it's even elevated more, sadly, because of the fact that they actually did lose one of their daughters. Autumn is, has passed. I think that in a lot of ways that's them. That's them in the movie, kind of showing like we wish we could have done more. We wish we could have been there. And I think it's a fine line. And anyone in Hollywood will tell you this, who actually has kids or has a life outside of the industry, is that it's very hard to find that balance of working in this industry and having a personal life with your family. It's a struggle. You're away for a year. At a time when you're filming a movie and you're working with these actors and you don't put your cell phone down. So I take all these subplots in these movies about father sacrificing for his family, almost like a personal thing that he's saying sorry to his own family for that in these movies.
That's I think that's the best way we could end our show on doing this. So,
yeah. So I'm just going to play these clips right as we end the show. So one of my questions that I asked during the interview, of course, ties into Autumn. And she is the one who committed suicide, and which basically forced both of them to leave the project, and rightfully so, because they chose their family over a project. And I think that's so important. But I asked them now at the end of this, did they find peace? And here's what each one of them had to say. And again, thank you for watching. We'll be back next week.
I mean, for sure, it's interesting. It also brought up a lot, it brings up a lot of emotions, right? Because so much of the film is wrapped up in our loss, of Autumn. And, so as you're working on it, sometimes I think you just all of a sudden something hits you and there's a flurry of emotions. And also just, I think too, just seeing the fans, embracing this cause, which is something personal. But I also think not just that it's personal now, but it's also something that I think the world needs right now. I mean, we've gone through quite a year, and so many people have lost their jobs or lost loved ones, or just even feel isolated because they've been alone through most of this. That I think, mental health and, suicide prevention is needed more now than ever. And, we did make a conscious decision to come forward and talk about it. And it was hard and it was a difficult decision to make. But I think we thought that, we are sort of in the public eye, and maybe not like, a movie star or anything like that, but enough so that we could, talk about it and give hope to people maybe when they didn't have hope, or let them know that there's support, because I think it's a hard thing to navigate when you're going through it. And we had a hard time and didn't really know where to turn. So I think that was an important element of this. And it's been with us, as important as it was to finish Zack's vision of the film, that's also been intertwined with the whole, journey.
Yeah, I did. It's been a cathartic journey for all of us here at the house. And I think, I couldn't be prouder of what the fans have been able to create through, their campaigns of mental health awareness and suicide prevention, and just that message, constant drumbeat that they, because it's always the next, they're never done. It's always the next fundraiser for AFSP. And, that's the amazing thing about the fans. They don't get tired of marching forward, with the banner. And so I think that because there's always someone to take the lead. And I think that's a great metaphor for, anyone who's suffering from depression or having some kind of thoughts of hurting themselves or anything like that. You can rely on someone to take the banner, and that is, you can reach out, there's help, and it's important to do.